Should you move to Canada as an international student or should you come to Canada as a permanent resident? In this video, I will be breaking down the advantages and disadvantages of coming to Canada as an international student versus coming to Canada as a permanent resident. Now, the first reason to come to Canada as a permanent resident is because you do not have restrictions on the number of hours that you need to work in Canada. You don't have any restrictions on where you live in Canada. You don't have any restrictions on what courses you do or where you want to do your courses. Freedom and flexibility is one of the biggest pros of coming to Canada as a permanent resident, where you can do absolutely whatever you want to do when you come to Canada in regards to live, study, and work in Canada, whatever you want to do. However, if you come to Canada as an international student, you can guarantee that you will have some restrictions on the number of hours you can work. You'll have restrictions on where you can live because you can only live close to where you go to school. And there are just many restrictions and immigration rules as it relates to being a student and having a student visa in Canada. If you want more information and you just want to hear more about Canadian immigration, you can definitely subscribe to this channel for more of those type of content. The number one disadvantage of coming to Canada as a permanent resident is the length of time for the processing. To come to Canada as a permanent resident, you will have to wait between the period of 6 months to 1 year before you actually reach Canada, and it can be even longer than that. Less than that, not so much, but longer than 6 months, 100%. Because even to gather your documents, that can even take 6 months to gather the documents to come to Canada as a permanent resident. So that's important to note, that processing time is one of the biggest disadvantages of traveling to Canada as a permanent resident. One of the disadvantages of coming to Canada as an international student is the tuition. The tuition in Canada is extremely expensive, and if you don't have the money to come to Canada as a student, that would be a significant disadvantage to you. However, when you think about permanent residents, you also need a lot of money because you need a large sum to show money, but still, it is still not as much. For a permanent residency, you're only showing some money, the money you have in your bank account, but with being a student, you actually have to pay the tuition. So it is not really show money, but it is literally pay up the money. So because of that reason, it would be cheaper to come to Canada as a permanent resident. So should you come to Canada as an international student or should you come to Canada as a permanent resident? Quite frankly, it really depends on where you are in your journey. One of the things that is the most important is to think about whether you have the requirements to come to Canada as a permanent resident, whether you have the level of money, whether you have all the documents, whether you are even eligible for any of the streams available to come to Canada. Like, those things is what you first look at. If you don't have those requirements, then it would be good to come to Canada as a student, and then that way you can get Canadian studies, and then you can get work experience in Canada, and you can use all of that to then apply for permanent residency. So you still eventually reach permanent residency at the end of the day. Now, I came to Canada as an international student, and then afterwards I became a permanent resident of Canada. It's really just about what your eligibility is. So quite frankly, if you are eligible to come to Canada as a permanent resident, just come as a permanent resident. If you're eligible to come to Canada as an international student, then just come here as an international student. I would definitely suggest that you come as a permanent resident. If you want to immigrate to Canada, come as a permanent resident. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.